Please give a warm round of applause to the Department of Supervisory Analytics Director, Director Noel Guinto.
So first of all, I'm joined this afternoon by my colleague and my a deputy director from our department, Miss Melissa Martinez. She's actually handling the data management and development group of the department, and we will provide some additional information as well on the department as we go along. So the presentation will cover three broad areas. So medyo different ito dun sa mga discussions natin earlier because in a way, the work that we're doing in BSP actually are on the ground level. Kami yung mga nasa back end, or kami yung nagpe-prepare ng information to an extent. And we provide the foundation for how certain things are supposed to be conducted, which becomes the basis for other people in the organization to conduct their activities. In particular, we actually service around 1,000 plus bank supervisors. So ito yung mga examiners namin that go out into the field. And the area of focus ng department namin is data, and more data. So we basically receive in our department about 70 to 80% of all information that are submitted by BSP supervised financial institutions. So the three topics will cover basically the first two will cover more on the areas of how on the working environment that we work on, and the environment where Prime is actually embedded in before we do a deep dive into the Prime initiative. So let's begin. I'm sorry. So at this point, it may be useful to have quite some idea on how the BSP is organized. So basically, we have 5 sectors in the bank. So these are provided under the general banking law. So each one of these sectors are headed by a deputy governor. One of these sectors is the FSS, or the Financial Supervision Sector, which is headed by a deputy governor as well. And this handles the supervision of all financial institutions that are under the ambit of the BSP. So to provide some context, this includes 45 large banks, or the universal and commercial banks, 6 digital banks, I think around 42 trade banks, and 390 rural and cooperative banks. So that's just the banking system side. So there's also the non-banks. These are the money service business, the pawn shops, which comprises in the thousands actually. So medyo marami-rami yung institutions that we are handling. We devised this diagram to show the work that we do in the sector in terms of how we interact with our supervised institutions and other stakeholders. So a key point to understand in this loop actually is that this is a highly data-driven interaction with our stakeholders and supervised institutions. On the left portion of the screen, you can see the different policies and the different information that we are gathering and developing as we go along. And then this information are then passed into 2 major fronts. So the 2 rectangles, the blue one and the green ones, these are the major surveillance activities that the sector actually conducts. The first one, on the blue one, is the micro-prudential surveillance portion. This pertains to activities that we do in particular for specific institutions. So in this case, these are very granular information. This information actually are very the actions that we do with regards to information here are very prescriptive, because this affects how a certain institution should function or should conduct itself. So dito pumapasok yung mga discussions on how we assess a particular bank, and the ratings that we provide to them. The other portion is the macroprudential surveillance portion, wherein aggregate data, the data of a system, like the banking system, that like the data that you can see also on the BSP website, are discussed with various industry associations. So each one of the major each one of the major bank groups, like the large banks or the commercial banks, they have their own association. So we have the Bankers Association of the Philippines, the Chamber of Trade Banks, the Rural Bank Association of the Philippines, the Bangko or Bangko Cooperative Association. And then very recently, nagkaroon na rin ng association yung mga digital banks natin. So ang tawag sa kanila is DIBA, so Digital Bank Association. So very new sila. So they're just six members at this point, since there's still a moratorium on the licensing of additional digital banks. So the information that flows through these two major areas are actually not independent of each other. So any finding, any information or that may be of concern sa mga specific banks may trigger the need to look at the larger or the systemic side to ensure that this is not this is not something that's happening on a wider front. On the other hand, information that may be gathered from the aggregate and data may result in the evaluation of specific activities of each institution. So all of this information, all of the insights that are gathered are then, of course, channeled to the management of the sector and the BSP in general. And the loop then goes back to the policies and procedures, which may result in the request or requirement for new data or for the discontinuance of existing data because there's no more need for such data to be gathered to be able to conduct our supervision activities. So as I mentioned, we actually gather around 70 to 80% of all data from various supervised institutions. So there's quite a large set of data that we are handling, and we are tasked not only to utilize that data, but also to manage them very carefully. So in the bank, there are also, in the other sectors, they're also gathering a large number of information. But unlike from our sector, the data that we are handling are defined to be confidential under the law, particularly the individual bank data. So we can actually publish aggregate data, but individual bank data, unless those that are actually allowed by law to be published or even required by law to be published, such as the published balance sheets, we are not supposed to disclose that to any party unless authorized by court or under the direction or instruction of the Monetary Board. So because of this, there's a necessity to handle data holistically and carefully in the bank. And data governance is quite a new area in terms of ensuring that data is handled properly throughout the data life cycle of an institution. So the data governance initiatives in BSP actually started quite seriously in 2019, early 2019. So we had a new governor at that time, and he brought along a chief information officer from the DBM. So we started off as an informal group, just sharing information with large data users and data producers in the bank. And by the end of the year, we were able to formalize a data governance policy. The data governance policy provided the high-level strategy and high-level approach that the BSP would like to undertake with regards to the use of its data. The pandemic hit, so the plan was actually to create a formal group that will handle the management of the data across the bank, and to an extent standardize its management and administration. So medyo na-delay kami ng about 3 months, and by the middle of 2020, we were able to formalize a data governance council. And then around this time, nagkaroon na ng instruction to create an initial data governance manual. And on the side of the sector, the financial supervision sector, we have also started work on the technical working group to start working on a comparable or parang magkakaroon na rin ng requirement on our supervised institutions to develop data governance policies as well on their end. So the next slide actually shows provide some more details on these activities. So the data governance policy is the high-level strategy that we're undertaking, which becomes the basis for and basically the data governance policy is managed under the Data Governance Council. And the data governance manual actually implements or provide the flesh and bones for this high-level policy. Ang first version nito was actually crafted under my direction and using the resources of our department. So our department is not really a department that handles data governance for the bank, but in the absence of a dedicated team of people to handle this, sa amin siya napunta during that time. So we actually crafted a data governance manual with the intention of providing some level of visibility and stock taking for the entire institution. So the data governance manual actually has about 50 pages of write-ups, but it consists of around 700 plus templates and schedules as we gather everything that we could probably gather from the different departments in terms of taxonomy, in terms of the data roles of various units, in terms of how data sharing is being conducted across the bank, with the intention that when we start formalizing a data governance practice in the bank, there will be an initial set of data or initial set of information that they can start working on. So as everybody knows naman siguro, Benjo no left for the Department of Finance, and Gov Medalla came in. And during this time, he brought along as well his CIO. So nawalan kami ng CIO. So, and then my former boss, who was the vice chair, also left the country for good. So anong nangyari, since I was the one tasked to that was handling the data governance manual at that time, I eventually became the Data Governance Council chair. So I held to that position for about a year now. And we had this intention at that time to really start working on having a dedicated data governance practice in the bank. So by around this time, HR actually approved our request for a dedicated set of people who will handle the data governance function. And just in time na nakakuha na rin ng bagong CIO si BSP. So that function will eventually be under the Information Security Office of the BSP. And we are actually at the I'm actually at the tail end of my work as the Data Governance Council chair, and I will eventually relinquish the role to the CIO hopefully by the start of next year. So I am a CISA by profession, and so parang in terms of actually having this kind of organization resonates well with me. In my former life in BSP, I was actually a bank examiner as well. So medyo nagsama-sama na yung mga experiences that I had over the past years, actually decades na. I've been with the bank actually for the past 27 years this year by December 8th. So yeah, unless you have perhaps I hope the information here are sufficient enough to provide some guidance on on the work that we're doing. In particular, for the last item, the data governance and ethical use of data, we're actually using we are actually adapting as guide the BCBS, or the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision paper number 239 on data aggregation techniques. So it's actually a 14-point principles-based paper, and it's actually a very good way to handle data internally, as well as on using the data itself. The only portion in the BCBS that's not really captured very clearly is the ethical use of data, which is starting to be the flavor of the month now, given all of these things about the AI and how biases can creep in, and how privacy issues will have to be eventually handled. So this is an area that we are looking at very closely, not only internally, but as well as for our supervised institutions, so that it goes beyond the usual consumer protection aspect of ethical use. So consumer protection essentially says that you handle the data in terms of with the intention of protecting the consumer, but it goes beyond that, because ethical use may not be even if the consumer actually says that they agree to the use of the data, if ethical concerns are actually higher than the agreements that the bank may have with their depositors or their customers. So this ethical use of data is something that we are looking at very closely as well. So that basically provides us a snapshot on, or a context on how data is being managed or handled in the BSP. So actually marami-rami pang activities that we undertake in the BSP with regards to handling of data. And the Data Governance Council actually has undertaken quite a number of activities during my term for about a year. So we are about to launch a data governance awareness survey, and we are also we were able to have a board approved digital data lifecycle management policy. Most of the times, I think most of our policy on data lifecycle is related to physical records, which follows the National Archives of the Philippines guidelines. There's not really much of a guideline that is specific for digital data. So the kind of guideline that we have for digital data right now actually just replicates the way we handle data on a physical document. But more and more there are data right now that do not go the route of being a digital a physical document that you sign and then you scan and become a PDF. Especially during the pandemic, we have actually created digital documents that did not went through the process of like a letter that I need to sign and then scan and then send out. So we have implemented correspondences that are actually in the digital space already. And the way to handle digital data may be different, or maybe different from the way we handle physical records. So this is an area that we are looking at very closely as well, because in a way this ties closely with the acceptability of information in courts. So there are discussions as well internally on, do you really need certifications? Do you really need a proof list? Those kind of things. Can you just use what was submitted to you digitally, and would that stand up in court in case there are cases that may be filed, or in cases of closed banks where certain depositors may have issues? From time to time, we receive requests for such information, and at this point, we still require that the bank certifies the report. The president would sign all of those things. So, but we're starting to look at the possibility of doing away with all of this um, manual or manual handling or manual intervention. And the Prime actually provides us um, the avenue or the foundation to be able to do this moving forward. So we are addressing with this initiative not only the inefficiencies that we have been encountering, but also to prepare us to future-proof the bank moving forward. So let's go into a deep dive of this. So basically, the BSP or the sector went through 3 stages of transition in terms of receiving reports. So the first one, of course, is the ubiquitous email. So in our case, we have dedicated mailboxes for certain types of reports. So I think right now we're running at around 80 plus or more reports. Our sector actually went through 3 major stages of technological transition, and we're not saying that we've done away with the email base. It's still there, it's still here with the BSP with our sector. But we have started what we did actually is to prioritize the reports that we need to move towards a more efficient process of submission. So sa background, we actually receives what we call the financial reporting package, consisting of around 240 plus schedules for the large banks and about half of that for the smaller institutions. And then these are then complemented by what we call as FRP related reports. These are reports that actually drill down on the major accounts of the main report. The main report actually consists of the balance sheet, income statement, and other relevant schedules, but there may be a need to further drill down on certain aspects like the capital adequacy ratio and all of those things. So all in all, a bank can actually be submitting on a regular basis, on a monthly basis, around 200 to 300 plus schedules. So these are batches of about 19 or 18 plus submissions. So medyo madami-dami siya. So if you're using an email-based process to submit this report, so you will have to remember 17 to 18 email syntaxes, because when the report comes in, there's a process of automation na kapag nabasa ng system na ito yung subject line, it gets trafficked or directed to certain folders before, and then the report are then detached and validated. So you can just imagine the amount of information that each bank will need to have to be able to properly submit to BSP. And if you're not submitting properly, there are actually monetary penalties for delays and for errors and continuous non-submission. So from the email based, we move to the what we call the financial institution portal. So this is a web-based portal with a login process with more security. The process here is more of an upload rather than emailing reports one by one. But you still need to upload one by one. So there's just this change of centralizing everything in one area, and what was actually removed is the need to remember a lot of syntaxes. So basically, hindi mo na kailangan tandaan na kailangan ganito yung format ng date kapag nilagay mo siya sa subject line. Ito yung acronym ng report, ito yung period ng report, and then and other things that you need to remember para ma-recognize siya ng system. With the FI portal, you just need to log in and then you need to upload individual reports. So there's been some improvements there, but it's not really transformational for our part, because the problem of using templates was not removed. Right now, pag kailangan namin ng isang line item, additional information, we will need to amend a template. The template will need to be calibrated or customized by our IT. And then you need to run it through some test. And by the time the template is ready, you don't need the data anymore. So ganun yung nangyayari. So parang medyo stale na yung information that you get. Hindi na siya ganun ka-relevant to the current situation. Especially if you're looking at stress scenarios. You're looking at cases where certain conditions are happening in the banking system. So we needed something that will actually move us away from an Excel-based type of submission and somehow provide consolidate everything, provide some means of consolidating everything, and then make it easy to transmit the data and make it easy for us to amend the report itself, allow us to get more data when we need it, ask the bank to stop sending certain data that we don't need, and then automate the entire process to the extent possible. So what happened was, in 2017, we were approached by the Bankable Frontier Associates. Our management was approached by this institution. The BFA, or the Bankable Frontier Associates, is an organization funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Omidyar Network, and the Rockefeller Foundation. So they have this program called the R2A, or the RegTech for Regulators Accelerator. So they wanted us to submit or propose use cases that they can fund in terms of POC, or proof of concept. So they will be providing a cash prize of $100,000 for the winning service provider. So the BSP actually submitted 2 proposals. One of the proposals is what we're discussing now. The other proposal is the one that was discussed earlier by Mr. Curtis Matlock. So the chatbot was actually part of the initial proof of concept under the BFA or the R2A program. So it started as a very crude chatbot, and now it has evolved into a robot-like AI-based, AI-enabled system that you can find in the BSP website. So so the 2 proposals from BSP were accepted. There was a hackathon that was made. A proposal was made by several service providers, and they eventually shortlisted a service provider from Croatia. So the service provider actually delivered the prototype in 2018, and that prototype was run. The proof of concept was run with 2 banks, so one domestic bank and one branch of a foreign bank. So it was declared a success. We were able to complete the prototype, the proof of concept at that time, and then BSP decided to expand the POC to a pilot test with 15 large banks, which was also well received. So well received siya noon kasi ginagawa nila yon on the side, so it doesn't yet require considerable changes into their systems. But there was promise. It was a promising thing for us, and management decided to go ahead and fully implement the system. So we went through the procurement process, and I think the winning bidder. Actually, we were doing all of this during the pandemic, so we were doing online bidding, we're doing online procurement, and the winning bidder actually was able to complete the system by the end of last year, December 2022. So we started on a parallel run starting January, and by June of 2023, or July actually, we were able to fully implement the system for our banks. So half of our large banks can actually submit XMLs via an API-based process, full machine-to-machine, so walang human intervention. Half of the large banks are still using a converter facility that we provided, but they're also submitting machine-to-machine via the API. And then the other banks have the option to use some of the assistance that we can provide in terms of converting their files and reports and uploading them if necessary. So meron pang transition na nangyayari, and we expect to complete the transition for the large banks within this month. So yung smaller banks like the rural banks, that will take us a while to move them towards full machine-to-machine submissions. So just a description of this. So the API XML reporting, which are now which we now branded as Prime, is a combination actually of two not so new technologies. So earlier today we've been discussing a lot of cutting edge technologies, but in our case we were the novelty is actually in combining two pre-existing or existing technologies and producing synergies using these technologies working together. So we combine the simplicity of the XML format in terms of being able to make the file size smaller and make it more manageable. We were able to move the 320 schedules into one XML file. So isa na lang yung file na isasubmit nila. We were able to reduce the file size from about 25 megabytes to 1 megabyte, I think. And then transmission time, we were able, so hindi ka na ngayon mag-upload na isa-isa. You can actually just push a button and the two APIs between the bank and the BSP will communicate with each other. The validation of the report that we were doing was actually, I think it's here in here. Yeah, we were actually able to reduce the validation time from, if I go back from the time of the emails, it's gonna take about, you're gonna have to take, it's going to take about an hour or two to get everything validated. So maghihintayan kasi yung 18 reports eh. So kailangan kompleto sila bago kami mag-start yung system na mag-validate. So that can take days, and then the validation result will take several days as well bago siya ma-send isa-isa. Ang nangyari, so it takes about a week before you find out na meron kang problem. So that's with the email-based submission. With the FI portal, you will also need to submit one by one the 18 reports, but the validation, you can actually get it in about an hour or so. So mas mabilis yung proseso. With the API XML, kinumbay na siya lahat. The validation process will now is now taking us about 10 seconds each. So ganun nakabilis yung validation. The difference also is that instead of the report being parked pag pumasa na until we reach a critical mass of about 80% past submissions bago namin maibigay sa mga users, we can actually push the information, the past report to our users within 24 hours upon successful validation ng report. So mas mabilis na nilang nakukuha yung report. That only handles the portion of the collection of the data and the validation. What the API XML actually provides us is the promise of being able to create analytics on top of it that are much more easier to handle. So we can actually plug in any of the existing analytics that other providers can offer to BSP, as well as develop analytics on top of it using our own data scientists, which can work on a Power BI based process. If you go to the BSP website, there's actually on the statistics area a financial industry surveillance tab. It's actually an interactive tab created using Power BI. So ito yung portion ng data that we can actually provide to the public freely dahil hindi naman siya under any confidentiality rules. So you can actually play with the data, slice and dice the data, look at it in various ways, and it will provide you with some visualizations. We're actually providing some of this information as well, very specific information to some LGUs that request data on the number of branches in their localities and how much loans that locality actually has, and those kind of things. Even the number of ATMs that their localities or their provinces has. So basically, this portion handles the data acquisition part. And it's actually a full suite of features that are included here. So so there are a combination of web portals, auxiliary interfaces, submission modules, validation modules. We can actually create our own reports on the fly. In the past, we will have to rely on our IT department to create the reports for us, and it depends on the workload that they have. So as I mentioned, can take anywhere between a month to 6 months before we can deploy a revised template. During the parallel run that we did from January to June, we actually revised the report at not less than three times. So we were actually getting feedback from the bank that you need to address this part, you need to address this part. So we just adjusted what we call the XSD, the XML schema definition or the design, and then we can just release it to the industry and say adjust your XML using this pattern. So we were able to, and with the enactment of the new Agri-Agra law, we actually created a new report to be able to capture the new requirements under the new law, because the previous law, the RA 10,000, there are new types of compliance, acceptable compliance that were introduced in the new law. So we are constrained, or we are bounded to complete our due process on Agri-Agra compliance by within a year and a half. So dapat matatapos namin siya from the time na nag-issue kami ng initial show cause letter to the bank for non-compliance, and then evaluation of their replies, and then having our management approve the decision on that particular institution. So the standing rule is that we need to complete everything within a year and a half at most for a certain period of compliance. So so that's why if we would have to wait for our IT at that time, we would have to be delayed by another 6 months. So kakain na naman siya sa oras. We were able to deploy a separate template from the main from the main XML within 3 months, and we are now actually gathering the data from compliance in September. So we will be able to complete or update the compliance submissions by the end of this year. So makaka-catch up na kami on that aspect. So you can just imagine the potential when other types of data like for sustainable finance, for green financing starts coming in. When you have to adjust certain data points and you need to reissue a new report. So in the past, you will have to reissue an entire new template. I'm not sure if any one of you are actually using that. Pero ang nangyayari sa amin, you will just adjust a cell, but you will have to issue it in quite a tedious process bago maging part na ng system uli ng bangko. So the system also includes an assessment module. So for those banks that are non-compliant, so for our case, there are 3 types of non-compliance. So if you submit the report before the deadline and it's wrong, it's called erroneous, obviously. If you submit it after deadline and it passed after deadline, it's called delayed. If you did not submit a report after a certain number of days, it will be considered as what we call unsubmitted. So the penalties escalate for that. So the system will actually be able to handle the computation and the tagging and monitoring of violations. And of course, the user account management will handle who will have access to the system and the changes and maintenance. So the other areas are more internal, log monitoring, file maintenance. File maintenance includes enrolling new reports, those sort of things, and audit trails, of course, to ensure that all of the activities are being monitored and logged properly. So this is actually a major undertaking for the department, and there's been some pushback on kaya ba natin ng June, all of those things. So we started in 2017 and we were hoping that before Governor Medalla stepped down, kasi nalaman namin around May na, no, na papalitan siya. We wanted to complete, so even by January, we wanted to complete this and make it part of his achievements. So the standing order was to complete by June. It was good that during this time, there were actually good practices that were followed in the initiation part. There were a lot of onboardings and briefings that were conducted with the supervised institutions. So almost all of them doesn't want to transition, of course. So medyo, so nandun yung nagiging pushback. But of course, you have to not only convince them, but also to show that this is really where BSP would like to go with regards to this initiative. There's actually a roundtable discussion that was even organized and attended by the Deputy Governor herself to somehow stress the importance of this project for the banking industry. In terms of execution, there was this constant effort to ensure that we stick to the timelines. So IT projects has a very not so good reputation in terms of scope creep and time slips. So I think this is one of our few major projects that we were on time and on budget, and we did not have to skip on any major features that we wanted to include. During the monitor and control part, when submissions are coming in, we were able to engage with banks for their different areas of concern. We were also able to make the necessary adjustments on our part. So if we would have followed to the letter what was required in terms of validation and all of those things that are necessary before we accept the report, we would probably not have been able to fully implement by June. So there has been some discussions on how to do things differently. So we had to work on things like materiality, things like whether these areas can be discussed later on and managed later and just allow it to pass at this point. So basically doing everything to fully close out the project and say that it is fully implemented by June. And we were able to publish our statistics for the June report with just 3 days, 3 days late actually. So we transitioned not only in the way we received the reports, we actually transitioned also in the version of the report itself. So we moved from version 14.5 of our report to a more IFRS aligned version 15. So there's been changes as well in the accounting standards that was followed for the submission of this the initial report through this system. So on the closing side, we were actually able to get more consensus from the vendor. The vendor management is actually a very important component in ensuring that the project would be successful. So our vendor was actually kind enough to provide us with additional facilities that we deemed was necessary for us to be able to do the transition much more smoothly. So they actually allowed us to have upload facilities and other facilities and tools that we can use to be able to fast track the way we process and evaluate the reports that are coming in. So for future directions and plans, as I mentioned, we have not yet transitioned all our reports to this format or approach, but we are in the process of actually rationalizing the remaining reports. So there's still we don't want to simply transition everything here and find out later that some of the information that we are transitioning are no longer relevant. So we're doing side by side with this technological transition, the reports rationalization in terms of the kind of data that we are requesting from banks. We are also the API approach also allows us to move to a pull mechanism wherein instead of waiting for banks to submit the report to us, we can actually do a pull approach wherein they will provide us an area within their database where we can get the data directly when we need it. So this will become very useful when we start working on very granular information. So information that are generated daily or even much more frequent than that will not necessarily be effective in terms of a data push type of submission. So we need to get the data directly from them on a more timely manner. As I mentioned, the collection of rationalized granular data. So we have started on the granular data path with our enhancement on the credit exposures. So banks actually submit individual data on credit exposures of individuals, and these are now we're now requiring more granular information in line with other advancements like in big data and the topic today of AI, wherein we can actually get more insights that we can feed back into our supervision loop. So these are just references if you would like to take a look at the various issuances that we made over the years. So if you could see here, we actually started the issuing or preparing our banks as early as 2021. So we issued an initial guideline saying we will transition, and you should have these components with you very soon. So from there, we started issuing additional guidelines along the way. And then as we issue the guidelines, we engage the banks by having briefings, by having even individual calls with them so to ensure that all of their concerns are addressed. So there's still quite a large differences in the way banks are handling their IT infrastructure, even for the large banks. It depends primarily on their business models, their strategies, and the kind of customers that they have. So being able to dialogue with them is actually a very crucial aspect of ensuring that we will be able to implement this project successfully and on time. So I think that's about it. I hope you were able to gain a few items of value and of note to you. So as I mentioned, we're basically handling the back end part of the front facing area of the sector, which are our bank examiners. But the prime project actually allows us to be on the forefront as well on analytics. So this allows us to have the necessary flexibility to develop analytics on the fly and to gather insights that are not usually relevant, not usually seen if you're looking at individual banks. So we have the opportunity of looking at the industry as a whole. So we would like to be able to capitalize on that opportunity by developing various tools that can mine the data and provide us with insights that are not easily recognizable when you're looking at the trees rather than the entire forest. I end my presentation there. Thank you very much for your attention.